what you can do with your comments.
I don't know. What can I do with my comments? I'm scared.
No. Justice League.
Okay, if that's what I do with my comments, then that's a good way to go about it. I'm okay with that. I didn't know where you were going with that, and I was kind of scared. Do you know what you could do with your comments? I was like, uh-oh, he's going to pull a Stanley from The Office. Stick him up your butt. Oh, Stanley.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is another thrilling edition of Pizza and Parsecs. I'm Dave.
I'm Liv.
And if this is your first time joining us, very briefly...
Welcome. Sorry.
Welcome indeed.
Welcome to the madness.
We're going to be geeking out on Justice League today.
Justice League!
The divisive 2017 film by Zack Snyder, kind of. And I guess we'll get things kicked off here with diving right into what our general thoughts are. Liv?
Okay, I liked the Justice League movie, okay? And I know that I'm going to get a lot of slack for this, but I liked the Justice League movie. I liked Ben Affleck as Batman, even though I was convinced I was going to hate him. I loved the sly bit of humor that we got from Aquaman in The Flash. I just thought it was overall, it was a better DC movie in comparison to, Batman vs. Superman. It wasn't as good as Wonder Woman.
Few things are. So I appreciated this movie so much. Let me preface before we dive into my more detailed thoughts by saying I am a DC fan.
Yes.
I love the DC movies for what they are. In the same way that I love all of the Star Wars movies.
Right. I have to say the same.
Anything that develops these characters, builds the world, and gives us more is something that I'm on board for. They sold me a ticket the second they told me it was Justice League.
Right. I have to agree. I think no matter what DC puts out, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not the same way with Star Wars, but I'm definitely that way with DC Universe.
I also liked Batfleck. I thought he did a very good job. I like the new additions of characters. I liked what they did with Cyborg. I liked what they did with Flash. I have my issues with this movie. Don't get me wrong. There are things in this movie that didn't work for me. But overall, I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were issues with the movie. And I think DC was trying too hard to be the Avengers in the Marvel universe.
Well, I think it would make sense to kind of give a little bit more of a backstory into what the production was like on this movie.
I don't know that part.
So this movie had a very troubled production. Initially, it was written and directed by Zack Snyder, who brought us movies like 300. His plan for Justice League was to span it over 2 movies. So Warner Brothers came back and said this movie has to be under 2 hours.
Dumb. How do you make a superhero movie 2 hours or less than 2 hours? Because Suicide Squad was 2 hours and 25 minutes.
Glossing over a lot of points here, but the big things that were happening were the studio asked for the movie to be under 2 hours. Zack Snyder had to step down as director because his daughter committed suicide.
Oh.
That's when Avengers director Joss Whedon came in and directed the rest of it. Along with that, about 25% of the movie was reshot. And by 25%, I mean 25% of the 2-hour theatrical version that we got.
I feel like that's illegal. There's something wrong with this. That's like asking a prosecutor to be your defense attorney. That makes no sense. What? Oh, we don't have him. Let's get the guy who does Avengers, the completely opposite movie, the kind of our competition to make our... That's just weird.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Joss Whedon had success with that. Zack Snyder had reached out to Joss Whedon for help. And then Joss Whedon stepped in a more full-time role as Zack Snyder stepped out to deal with the loss of his daughter.
Right.
The movie had a very troubled production, a lot of reshoots, including the infamous mustache incident with Henry Cavill. But we'll get there.
I must have missed that. I was too excited about the fact that it was a Justice League movie. So I was just sitting in my seat, smiling. But just really giddy. I mean, that's how I felt about... Batman vs. Superman was not the best movie in the entire world But I remember sitting there and not caring that it sucked. I just was excited to see Batman kick Superman's butt.
As it should be.
Exactly.
We are Batman fans. We are pro-Batman fans over here. From this point on in the podcast, I think it should be noted, we are going to talk about spoilers. So from here on out, if you have not seen this movie...
Where have you been? It was 2017, y'all. We had an election since then. Like, wake up.
Get woke.
Get woke.
I'm not sure that's what that means, but we're going to use that anyway.
We're old.
At any rate, in this movie, Liv, what did you like about it? Diving into some of the more spoilery type points.
I really, really enjoyed the kind of transformation, this kind of weird plot twist when like Superman, because we all knew Superman was quote unquote dead, but we also knew Superman wasn't dead because we saw the rocks floating at the top of his casket. I really enjoyed the entire scene where Superman was like, "Who are all of you? I'm gonna kick all your butts." Especially the part when Flash is running and he's like, "Oh, I've got this in the back." And you see Superman moving his head at the same speed as the Flash. And he's like, "Oh, crap." Like, it was just really funny. I really liked the cinematography and the choices that they made in that particular scene. I really liked how they brought out a lot of Aquaman's humor, because I don't feel like he was as funny in his other movie, Wonder Woman. Hands down. Fantastic.
So for me, I'll start off sort of talking about the visuals, right?
It looked like a comic book.
Right. So that's something that Zack Snyder does really well.
So
but before I dive into that majesty there, I want to take a moment to call out the big tonal and color palette shift from Batman versus Superman. It sort of sheds this grim and dark undertone that Batman versus Superman had and replaced it with this happy and brighter tone. People actually smiled. It was just a more enjoyable, consumable presentation.
Yes. I mean, even Batman smiled, which is rare. Wonder Woman smiled too.
Everybody smiled.
Yeah.
So diving into some more of the visual side of things, we've talked about it several times already. Zack Snyder is a brilliant cinematographer and is a master at evoking this emotional response with the shots that he constructs. It makes you feel feelings. It resembles frames from a comic book. It really puts you in that headspace going into this, that you are getting a comic book movie.
And that's one of the things about the Marvel universe that disappoints me is the DC universe. All of their DC movies thus far look like comic books to me. There are those moments and those shots where you're just like, this is a comic book. And Marvel doesn't do that. It makes me sad.
Marvel is much more cinematic blockbuster type shots. So let's talk about the action sequences in this movie. So like I said before, Snyder constructs these very compelling series of shots. These were some of my favorite ones. First and foremost, anything and everything with Wonder Woman or the Amazons.
So good. So good.
That beginning scene in the bank heist, or it wasn't a heist. It was when those terrorists were going to blow up the bank.
Yeah.
She just goes in there and you get those dramatic slow motion shots of her just coming in, thinking quickly and kicking butt.
Oh, yeah. Well, and in that particular sequence, too, like one of my favorite things to do in Justice League or Wonder Woman, which are two of my current favorite DC movies as of today, and knowing Wonder Woman 2 is coming out. Every time there's any sequence, any action sequence, there are moments where you could literally pause it, print it out, and make an actual comic book of the movie by the images that they like slow motion have, in my opinion. It's like I could take all these little moments of like slow motion action sequences, print them out, and make a comic book and still get the same story. It was really cool because they were slow and they're like, you got to soak it in. And I can see every facial expression of the bad guys around me.
She plays that part so well, too.
She's just a really good actress.
Transitioning from that to another Amazon scene, the Steppenwolf Amazon chase.
Yeah.
When Steppenwolf is going after the mother boxes, one of the first ones that he goes after is at the Amazonian stronghold on Themyscira, I presume. Hippolyta and her Amazonians are desperately playing this game of cat and mouse, this game of keep away with Steppenwolf. The way that they sort of navigate that from a cinematic standpoint was so beautiful to me.
Yeah.
The way that any shot with the Amazons is composed is extremely compelling to me.
Yeah.
Of course, you mentioned this earlier, the post-resurrection Pet Cemetery battle with Superman.
That was so cool.
That shot where Flash is coming up on him and it's just a close-up on Superman's face, and all of a sudden you see his eyes just dart over and track with the Flash, and this look of just awestruck surprise.
Right. Because at this point, like, we've only had these characters for a short period of time. We haven't had these characters. It's like the first half of the movie is just retrieving and collecting Cyborg, the Flash, Aquaman, getting all the Justice League characters together. It was super dope. So, you see on the Flash's face, like, I've never met Superman before. I got this in the bag. I'm the fastest man alive. Oh, he's not a man. He's an alien, and I'm dead.
That was a hysterical sequence. I really liked what the Flash brought to Justice League.
Oh, yeah.
Finally, I want to call out the final battle with Steppenwolf in that Russian wasteland area, basically.
Yeah.
I thought that was very, very well done. At that point, there were also emotional stakes in the movie. I thought it was really well done the way that they used the parademons. Overall, I thought that entire sequence was extremely well done. Everybody had something significant to do.
Right.
Despite where they came from, what their previous reservations were about working as a team.
Right.
It was them working together as a unit without Superman at that point.
Yeah.
And then you have Superman finally coming in. What I loved is the spirit of the moment when Superman came in. He doesn't come in and immediately start going after Steppenwolf.
Right.
The first thing that he does after, an initial very brief beatdown, he recognizes that there are citizens in danger.
Right. It's a very atypical Superman thing to do.
He goes right after the citizens of that area, basically helping out Barry, the Flash, the fastest man alive.
Just in case you didn't know, spoiler alert, Barry Allen is the Flash.
So moving right along, one other thing that I appreciated from this movie is the way that they depict these characters is it blends a number of interpretations of the characters. So you get some influence from, for example, Batman the Animated Series. You get a little bit of that in here. You get a little bit of New 52 in here. I thought it was just interesting how it didn't just stick to one.
Right.
It ran across all these iterations of these characters and created what we ended up seeing in Justice League.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that was successful and that Avengers, for me, was not successful in. Like, for the Avengers, and I'm going to compare the two, but I'm getting somewhere with this, I promise. With the Avengers, I felt like it was just a bunch of characters just thrown into a plot point, and we're like, oh, this character will go really well right here. Whereas the Justice League, we had this pot of characters, and they meshed well, but they still had their individuality.
Absolutely, I can definitely see that.
It was really cool to have even the different humors between the characters was nice. And it wasn't just, oh, well, let's put these characters together because they're going to mesh well because they're all funny. It was, let's put all these characters together. We'll utilize different universes, like a different kind of Batman. We'll play up this kind of Batman here. We'll play up this kind of Barry Allen here. We'll play up all of these. And so in my head, and my hope, which I know isn't going to happen because things go crazy in the DC universe and we can't have consistency. But like the guy who played Barry Allen acted like a Barry Allen, in my opinion, and I really liked him. Same with the guy who played Cyborg. He was a little bit more reserved and a little bit more like the character who was like, I don't really want to be a hero. I didn't ask for this in the first place.
I think with Cyborg, it's one of those things where we're catching him trying desperately to come to grips with this perceived curse.
Right. And I think a lot of people utilize it or looking at the comparison of the cyborg, the mainstream cyborg right now, where it's like, oh, he loves his powers. He's like the goofy big guy. And I'm referring to the old Teen Titans, not the stupid new Teen Titans. What I'm saying, like people, like I compared this cyborg to the cyborg that I know from the Cartoon Network version of Teen Titans back when I was growing up. Best Teen Titans ever. Come at me. This new DC one on DC Universe, not a big fan of this one.
So we like what they did with the characters. As far as the story goes, one thing that I will say right up front, I was not bored during this movie at all. I thought the pacing was very good. I was worried at the beginning of the movie that the pacing might get a little tiresome. At some point, it just flipped a switch and then it was very, very entertaining again.
In my opinion, I thought the storyline was good. It was not... For a 2017 superhero movie where we have this massive, massive fan base behind the Avengers, I thought it could have been constructed a little bit better. I did find parts where I was a little bit more bored because it just kind of felt surface level.
That is one of the main critiques of this movie.
That's just my opinion.
Basically, it's a thin plot.
Okay, yeah.
So let's dive into the superficial aspects of this. Surface level, yes, we have this fate of the world scenario. Steppenwolf is trying to collect all these mother boxes to make Earth a wasteland so he can be welcomed back into the new gods, while briefly introducing Darkseid into that. With that, we get just a tad bit more backstory into the parademons. Our heroes are corralled together. Most are unwilling at first. They have this inner squad moral struggle of resurrecting Superman, and they eventually resurrect Superman. We get introduced to Aquaman, Flash, Cyborg, and not to mention some humor into the DCEU. Finally, having that dramatic and comical at times civil skirmish between Superman and everybody else.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, we end up at the end with Superman coming in and saving the day, beating up Steppenwolf. Cherry on top, if you stuck around after the credits, you would have seen a tease of the Legion of Doom, including one of the most metal villains in DC, Deathstroke. That is the superficial side of things. I see a deeper plot here. Right. And it has to do with the character development that goes along with that. So we talked about Cyborg, and we are introduced to Cyborg as he's trying to come to grips with this perceived curse that he has. Throughout this process, he starts as this unwilling participant into the Justice League, and through his adoption of the idea of being part of a team, he goes from this state of mind where he sort of fears his abilities and resents his father as well, to accepting these abilities as a gift and seeking to understand rather than reject them. And this is evidenced in the final scene with him that shows him working with his father in the lab, and where he's learning about his new powers and working side by side with his father, right, instead of hating him. Moving on to Diana. Wonder Woman!
Can't help it.
And then with Diana, she's still this broken-hearted goddess who lost the love of her life, 80 plus years ago. Basically, she just is working in the shadows, much like Batman does.
Right.
She just ends up showing up to save the day and then bebops on out of there. And
y'all good. Bye.
Exactly. And she goes from that to becoming this beacon of hope at the end.
Right.
She comes out of the shadows and becomes this fixture in society, this inspiration for everyone.
Right.
And then let's talk about Barry Allen and his plot throughout the movie. Barry, at this point, doesn't have any experience. We have a very green Barry Allen. He doesn't know what it takes to be a hero. When Bruce comes in and sort of adopts him into the Justice League. He's super eager, but he has no idea what he's doing.
Right.
After that first skirmish that he has with Steppenwolf, he starts to come into his own and learn more and more about what it actually takes to be a hero. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to that final battle with Steppenwolf. He plays a not so insignificant part in that battle.
Yeah.
I see that transformation, while it's a simple transformation, I think it's significant. And these are mostly geared towards the development that the characters go through. And the last one that I want to talk about is Aquaman. Now, this one for me was a little bit more tricky to actually see what his development was, but it's not entirely absent. You might remember that scene when they're in the transport on their way to Russia.
Right.
And he has that scene where he's sitting on the Batmobile. He had inadvertently sat on the lasso of Hestia, right?
I remember that.
As we know, the power of the lasso is to surface the truth.
Yes.
The message that I got with that scene was not necessarily that these were things that he was thinking and was trying to hide from the team. These were things that he was afraid to explore himself.
Right.
These were things that he was afraid to admit to himself.
Yeah.
He has that one line in there where he talks about how he had yet to embrace the land or the sea as his home.
Right.
I think that this scene in general sets us up to have somewhat of an emotional connection that drives us into his standalone movie.
Right.
So I thought that was subtle yet very well done.
Yeah. I don't disagree with your standpoint as far as the character development. I think what made it a very thin plot for me was we had this whole entire movie that set up one of the characters for the Justice League. And we had this massive, massive breakout for the DC universe that was following up Batman versus Superman.
I see what you're saying now.
Yeah. So we have Batman versus Superman that, while wasn't the best movie in the world, I thought had a really nice storyline to it. It wasn't an atypical story. People like to compare Batman versus Superman to Civil War. I thought this did a better job, not because it was, we're killing people, we're not killing people. It was two perceptions of the truth when the truth was actually skewed. So it was this really cool, deep movie if you push back some of the harder to watch parts of Batman versus Superman. Then we have Wonder Woman, where you get this massive new world kind of opening up in front of us and a whole new character that we really haven't seen on the big screen yet. We've seen Wonder Woman movies and TV shows, but we haven't seen something of this level before. We've had lots of Batmans, we've had lots of Supermans, but we have not had a Wonder Woman movie. The director of that movie took this and made a fantastic film. I'm not going to deny it's the best DC movie thus far, in my opinion, as of today. But then you have Justice League, after getting this massively deep dive movie into who Wonder Woman is. Yes, the Justice League isn't a movie about the backstory of Cyborg, the backstory of Barry Allen, the backstory of Aquaman, because we eventually got that with Aquaman. But I thought we just had this massive success with this really amazing story, this well thought out story of Wonder Woman. I mean, even down to we get current day scene where she's going into the museum with this package and she opens it up and it's a picture frame or just a picture. And it takes her all the way back to the very beginning. And we find out that it was from at the very end, she's calling Bruce and is like, hey, thanks so much. I didn't know, if we'd ever find something like this again. So good. So good. And then we get Justice League, where it's a very atypical, we have a massive threat, we can't do it by ourselves, let's go collect all these people that Wonder Woman discovered beforehand. She was the one who found all the stuff in the first place. Let's be real. And then we just have a big threat, gather people, kick butt. The only for me, the only part that kind of thickened it was when they revived Superman.
I can agree with that. And I do think that the backstory and the emotional investment that was afforded to us in the standalone Wonder Woman flick did service her character very well.
Right.
And
Well,
in this movie, and so I can agree. I can definitely see where you're coming from, and I can agree with that.
And I'm not saying that I'm comparing Wonder Woman's backstory to everyone else's backstory.
I didn't think you were.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, just in case our listener questions that.
No, I agree with you. I feel like that thin plot argument could have been remedied with doing these in the quote unquote right order. So setting up these characters in their own standalone flicks. So you would have had the Aquaman flick, you would have had the Flash flick, the Cyborg flick, so on and so forth before this movie.
So much better.
However, does Justice League still manage to establish and service the new characters enough to drive the story?
Yes, and that's why I say, like, I'm not saying that their backstory wasn't what carried that wasn't thickening the plot. I'm sitting here thinking, like, if we didn't have this Wonder Woman movie, I think I would have had a greater appreciation for Justice League. But because we had this amazing Wonder Woman movie and saw what DC is capable of putting out there, and then coming out with a very shallow plot for Justice League, I sat back and was like, you just put out this great movie. You have the capabilities and the funds and the finances to do this. I get like the production part of things. Like, I can understand where that would have had a huge impact on it. And knowing that now, like, I understand that. But we have this massive movie over here that shows the capability of Warner Brothers and DC. And then we have Justice League. Vastly different. And then we get Aquaman. Like, it's just very clear the consistency of making these movies is not there yet.
I agree. I think this movie tried to do a lot in one movie.
Yeah, I should have done 2 parts.
Exactly. That's initially what it was designed to do. For what we're getting with a 2-hour movie, we're getting the introduction of 3 new heroes, a new villain, balancing character development while driving the story forward without the movie being 4 hours long. Let's talk about the CGI mustache removal.
Yeah, I'd missed this. I don't even know.
So we talked earlier about how this movie had a troubled production. They had to do reshoots. Well, these reshoots coincided with Henry Cavill filming the latest Mission Impossible movie. So Henry Cavill had a mustache in the latest Mission Impossible movie. They had to call him back for these reshoots, and they were negotiating between these production companies. They told Warner Brothers that we can't let Henry Cavill shave his mustache for the reshoots. They had to spend all this money just to remove a mustache, which for me is only noticeable a little bit.
I definitely didn't notice.
For me, there were some scenes, especially in I'm going to feel really stupid if this wasn't one of the scenes where they digitally removed it, but I'm pretty sure they did. The scene where they're back on his farm in the fields. I remember seeing that, and there was like this little fluctuation in there that kind of made me raise an eyebrow a little bit. This is probably partially my fault for staying in touch and keeping apprised of the production of this movie. If I hadn't, maybe this would have been unnoticeable because you didn't notice it.
I didn't notice it, but I also don't, like, for me, when I watch movies, those are not necessarily things that I go looking for. You know, like, when I watch TV shows, I look for those, like, inconsistencies, you know, like in Friends when they are drinking out of a mug and then all of a sudden the mug's a different color or it's in a different place or the level of the liquid's different. Those are the things I notice, but I don't notice little things like that, nor do I go seeking out for them because I don't think I even knew that he was playing in a Mission Impossible movie because I've only seen like one.
When we were talking about the weak points, you agreed with the notion that this movie has a rather thin plot.
Yes.
What other shortcomings or critiques do you have for this film?
Honestly, I think some of the costume design choices were not my favorite. I did not like the Flash's costume. I thought that was just kind of a shift off of the Barry Allen and the Flash that we actually know. It seemed a little too mechanical. It looked a little too much like Iron Man's costume, and it was trying a little too much. I think I would have much preferred a typical cheaper suit from Barry Allen. Not cheap. Cheap's a bad word. A flexible suit. Something that looked like the Flash.
I thought that the Flash's quote-unquote suit was more armor.
Yeah, and I didn't like it. That doesn't look like the Flash. I thought just the kind of the characters or the actors that they chose for Flash and Cyborg, they're good, don't get me wrong, but they didn't, like, Cyborg didn't look the part. The kid who played Cyborg just didn't look like a typical cyborg. He was supposed to be this football player, you know, he's this athlete, and in my opinion, I was like, it was a little scrawny for me. I don't know. I thought some of the just, I guess the costuming and the wardrobe was a little too, wasn't good. That's my opinion.
See, I actually like Ezra Miller.
Okay.
I liked him as the Flash. However, I have a deep, deep love for Grant Gustin as the Flash in the DC Berlanti verse that we have on the CW.
Oh, yes. And that's why I have an issue with this guy.
Exactly. I feel like one of this movie's shortcomings is that we're spoiled in other areas.
Yeah.
Through no fault of this movie or this cast. Like, we've just been spoiled with good things. In that light, one thing I do want to bring up that I feel like has spoiled a lot of what DC has tried to do is, and I know you're going to disagree with me on this wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Christopher Nolan.
Oh, lordy.
Christopher Nolan spoiled us with his Dark Knight trilogy.
I did not like that trilogy at all.
So these were just so artistically and masterfully composed films. Today, I feel like there is just less artistry overall with the majority of superhero films now. Now, I feel like we do get close with films like Wonder Woman. I thought there was a lot of artistry involved with that for sure. By and large, I feel like, you know, we're losing that artistry in the comic book cinematic universes, both Marvel and DC. Another exception would probably be the Watchmen series. What I appreciated about Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy is that he didn't really pander to his audience at all. He made such a smart, dramatic, tragic, and dark take on the Batman. And it was a very interesting look that we hadn't really seen in cinema. You have to remember, the Batman we've been getting in media up until that point had all been somewhat comical, had that comedic element to it, going back to the 60s. And then Tim Burton's Batman, which it was a little bit more serious, but it definitely had that camp to it. And then Nolan comes along and then hits us in this face with this gritty, real movie about Batman.
Michael Keaton is the best Batman in the entire universe. I just want to put that out there.
Granted. Today, I feel like we get a more watered down version of that to make it more digestible for the general moviegoer.
I disagree, but I did not like the Dark Knight series. At all. Not any part of me liked any part of those movies. I just want everyone to know, that one person out there to know, I do not like the Dark Knight series. And I agree with you, though. I do agree that it was a beautiful movie. I've watched each and every single one. Even though I was digging my heels in, and I was like, I really don't want to see another one because they genuinely just terrified me. I think that's really what it was. They were dark movies based off of the graphic novel opposed to the comic books, but they were visually beautiful movies. They had, you know, just that right amount of graphic novel feel and comic book feel to kind of bring you back into superhero world. I just don't like the movie.
Two more points that I have that didn't entirely work for me. I didn't feel like Steppenwolf was a strong enough character to be a supervillain. I thought he was a perfectly serviceable villain. At the end of the day, we're talking about a Justice League film. It needs a supervillain. I understand that, you know, from the shadows, he's working with Darkseid, but in the black box of this film, it just kind of seemed odd, you know, out of place, out of context. For Steppenwolf, for me, to have worked better, actually bringing in Darkseid, even if he didn't really do anything, would have serviced Steppenwolf as a supervillain more, or just giving Steppenwolf much more backstory, which this movie did not have time for.
Right.
To hit that 2-hour limit.
I think I was just most disappointed that it wasn't Lex Luthor as our supervillain. I know he's in jail, he's in Arkham, whatever. But I think with the fact that we had just had Batman vs. Superman and we saw the development of Lex Luthor, I was more disappointed that we had a new quote-unquote supervillain and it wasn't actually Lex. Over and out.
Anything else that you want to bring up before I bring up my last and final point?
This score didn't impress me. It wasn't one of those ones where I was like, oh, I genuinely love the music behind it. Like, I honestly don't recall it. And being a dancer, like, that's something that I absolutely love paying attention to when it comes to any kind of like superhero movie or action movie in general, is just, can I use this score for choreography? I used Wonder Woman's for a piece right after it came out. Absolutely loved this piece. It was a really beautiful solo that kind of just encompassed who Wonder Woman in this particular universe is and what she represents. Was not a big fan of this, just the music choice, the score. I don't know who was in charge of that, but I wasn't a big fan. It was not memorable.
You literally took words from me.
It's the truth, though. You asked me.
We're coming on the coattails from Batman vs. Superman, right? Where we had Hans Zimmer.
Mm-hmm. Which was a great score.
Who, yes, amazing score. Hans Zimmer is chef's kiss good. Hans Zimmer worked with this other composer called, I think it was Junkie XL. Junkie XL was initially slated to do this movie.
Yeah.
I feel like we would have had a very similar spirit
in
the musical compositions that we would get in Justice League. I'm not really sure of the backstory to this piece, but somehow Danny Elfman got brought on to do the score for this. We know Danny Elfman is no stranger to comic book movies. He did the original Batman, the 1989 Batman, excuse me, not the original, but he did the 1989 Batman. He did Avengers Age of Ultron. And of course, how can we forget Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
I was about to say, these are all great. And now I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here.
With that in mind, I will completely agree with you that this score, the music in this was entirely forgettable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't think it disserviced the movie necessarily. It just didn't do anything for me to drive or evoke emotional responses. Like, I don't look back on scenes from the movie like I do with a movie that had Hans Zimmer composing something and remember the scene and the music and then feeling that that emotional swell.
Right.
I didn't have that from a music and composition standpoint in this movie.
Yeah. And for me, if I'm watching a movie, like, I'm going to jump ship completely. The first time I watched Shutter Island was like, I knew I was going to choreograph pieces to music from Shutter Island because of how captivating it was. Didn't feel this way. I do have another one. I didn't like the end credit tag. Don't tease me with something awesome and then not do it. Just saying. Well, because you have Slade at the end. It kind of gives you this whole concept that, well, we're going to get this big bad guy. But every universe that I know Slade in has been any universe with Robin or Nightwing. Because there's a connection there. There's that part in that. In the CW series of Arrow, we get Slade and we get to see this whole other side of where Slade can come in. Don't tease me with one of my favorite supervillains and then do absolutely nothing with it. That's like what Avengers did, or like the whole Avengers series did, when they were like throwing out these like little tiny Easter eggs at the end and then they'd wait a year. It's been 3 years. DC. Give me a movie with Slade, give me a movie with either Nightwing or Robin, and give me Ben Affleck back because I'm not happy about this new Batman. I love Slade. Slade's like my favorite bad guy. Next to Lex Luthor and Harley Quinn.
Anything else?
No, just those three. Those are my favorite three.
Okay.
I also like the Riddler, but for one reason and one reason only. Jim Carrey. He was a good Riddler. He made me laugh.
I need to get you on board with Gotham.
Yes.
I feel like you'd have another favorite Riddler if you watched Gotham.
Probably, but nobody beats Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey plays a very specific version of the Riddler. It's not the Riddler as I know the Riddler.
Right.
I love Jim Carrey's interpretation of the Riddler.
Yeah.
He does it in a very Jim Carrey way, and by virtue of Jim Carrey doing Jim Carrey things, I love it.
Right.
That wasn't the Riddler for me.
Right. And I can understand that because like he played a more lighthearted.
Really? Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
You don't say.
Less cynical Riddler. And I think that's why I liked it so much, is because in that one, you know, you have Two-Face in that particular Batman. It is a darker Batman, and he kind of just brought that life to it. But now I'm on a tangent, so we need to move on to actual Justice League. Except Jim Carrey is awesome at the Riddler. Okay, do you have any other things that you thought were shortcomings?
I did. And this one is something that is very near and dear to my heart. It grinds my gears to no end. Let me just take a second and talk about Flash's running form.
What was wrong with it?
It was ice skating. That's what it looked like. It looked like ice skating. And it bugs me to no end. This movie cost $300 million to make. You could have hired a coach for an afternoon to learn to run.
When you say ice skating, can you elaborate? Because I am not a runner. I'm trying to compare this Barry Allen to CW Barry Allen, where he has the flat palms when he runs. What about Justice League Barry Allen is ice skater-esque? Because I'm genuinely asking because I don't know.
In ice skating, you have a wider range of motion to keep balance.
Okay.
It looks like he's very off balance.
So you're saying he kind of runs like side to side like an ice skater or a speed skater would?
Yes.
Okay. I was just curious. I would have never been able to tell the difference. When I first saw this movie, it just looked like he was running. Like, I don't know the difference between running and running. But since being with you...
What?
Okay, like, I would have never picked up on the actual side-to-side movement. I would have never picked that up. Because that's not what I was focusing on. But
his
ever
arms
since...
were flailing out. Like, he looked... You know, have you ever seen a video of a baby deer trying to walk?
It's cute.
That's this iteration of Barry Allen trying to run.
Okay.
I don't know if that was intentional, but it was ugly.
I completely understand that. But as a non-runner, would have probably never picked that up. Would have never thought twice about his running form. It was not until I started dating you and you teaching me more about running forms. Now I drive down the street and I'm like, wow, he's really like tornadoing his arms. Like terms that you have used and have taught me with. Now I'm seeing these things. But it's not something that I probably would have picked up.
Any final thoughts on Justice League?
Still love it.
I still love it as well.
Doesn't matter. It could have been crap. I would have loved it.
I'm a fan because this expanded the universe. It developed characters. It built a world that I can get invested in and can get behind.
Yeah. And that we've been patiently waiting for a long time. I mean, I think it was when the first Avenger movie came out where I remember sitting down thinking, man, I can't wait till DC does this too with the Justice League. Granted, we've only got one movie. DC, Warner Brothers, come on now. I need another one. It's been long enough. But we get Wonder Woman, so it's okay. Maybe after 4 months we'll have another Justice League like last time. Maybe it's just it's a trend.
Maybe. So I think that about wraps up this episode of Pizza and Parsecs.
Woo-hoo. We
did it.
We did it.
We did another thing.
Whoa.
I'm Dave.
I'm Liv.
And tune in next time. You can check out our show on bit.ly/Pizza and Parsecs pod or follow us on socials at Pizza and Parsecs. You can also find Pizza and Parsecs on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Let's talk some specifics here. Let's talk
about some specifics here, Dave. You want to talk about the specifics?
I do.
We can talk specifics. What kind of specific things do you want to talk about specifically?
So specifically, I want to sort of dive into
the specifics. Cannot wait.
Why did you just do the Wakanda Forever thing?
That's in her. She does that too. She's got her like bracers, and she's like pew pew. She's like, it's in the promo.
It looked like you were doing the Wakanda Forever thing, and I was like,
put it to my chest. This would be Wakanda. This is Wonder Woman. I just watched The Lion King, the new one, for the first time. I've seen The Lion King, but the new one with Beyonce. Roger, over and out. I have nothing to say about Beyonce being Nala.
If you liked it, then you should have put a main on it. If you liked it, then you should have put a main on it. What?
Oh, it was just...
Here's what I will say about it being a thin plot.
It's like a puddle. You step in it, your shoes don't really get that wet, but they get kind of wet.
So, let's talk. I'm just kind of trying to gloss over that.
Don't gloss over it. It's money. I don't know. You got me Chipotle. Now I'm all like fed and wired.